In this episode, we wade into the playground of the US political landscape, try to understand the Trump supporter and the breakdown of a satirist. We once again fail to comprehend the attraction of Fox News and contemplate the narrow miss for democracy.
That is also not a point of order.
Mr. Gwynny, the Tiger, Montashi.
Listen, my man, listen.
Order, members, order.
Listen properly.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Why are you so interested in the ANC matter? On a point of order here.
Get us Hillary Clinton's emails.
Your hands have got blood.
National Coronavirus Command Council.
It's just a joke, but it's true.
All South Africans will have to stay at home.
Do I want law enforcement to clamp down on the taxi industry? No.
Does any of the blame belong to you?
Darling, is the wind blowing today? I'd like to watch television.
People selling cigarettes illegally in our streets. Do you think that government loves that?
Good morning, and welcome to the US election episode. I think it's 14 or something. Anyway, my name is Neil de Villiers, and if I were a major news network, I'd be Russia Today. Seriously, just go watch it. They have some amazing investigative work, even though it might not seem like it. Some truly interesting alternative views, and yeah, just something really different from the rubbish on all the other channels. I'm joined in studio by Judicious, Johannes Landman, who is?
For the first time in a few weeks, I agree with your adjective. Thank you very much.
There are only so many things that start with Y or J, dude.
All the good ones, like Johannes. After giving this much thought, I concluded that I am the New York Times. Why? Because they are gently biased. They acknowledge that they are flawed. They do their best. They try to see the other side, and they pride themselves on doing hard quality work despite their flaws.
Thank you. Rustic, Rob Cass, who is?
I'm Fox News. I'm pretty much full of shit.
And acrimonious, Andrew Park.
I guess it's not mainstream, but I have to be democracy now. I am just too into that. My girlfriend's a little jealous of Amy Goodman even, so that's...
Tell me about Democracy Now! In 30 seconds.
It is not corporate funded, it's independent, and the idea behind it is that it follows grassroots organizations and movements.
Ooh, yeah.
And you look at it and you want to doubt it at first because the production value is pretty low. But all of that effort is going into the reporting. It's super, super solid, and you'll hear things that you don't hear on other news networks and go fact check them and find out that they are in fact correct, however unbelievable they may sound.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is Andrew, in my opinion.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah, it's a
great.
brilliant thing. You've shared quite a few links from that with me, and yeah. To all our listeners, if you're interested, go and check it out. Was it? They did quite a lot of stuff on Noam Chomsky. Was it started by him?
It was started by Amy Goodman, who's
okay.
an investigative reporter who has an awful lot of street cred, not least of all for throwing herself in the way of a massacre between Indonesian police and I think peasants or just local people in East Timor when Indonesia was invading.
Oh,
so
crazy.
Yeah, so she and there was another guy with her who kind of jumped on top to try and protect her, and he got the shit kicked out of him by these Indonesian soldiers. Yeah.
Crazy.
So stuff like that. She stands up for things. She's not the kind of person who's going to go with her own interests rather than what's worth reporting. Yeah.
Well, let's get ready to rumble. Fox News. I've been watching a hell of a lot of Fox News, and it has been an absolute eye-opener.
Could you tell us why?
You obviously can't stream it on DSTV or whatever, so you have to go onto their site, and the player is only this small, but I've had my fill of Fox News in this election. So there's a couple of things that in no real order that I want to talk about. The first thing is how they paint other news networks as the mainstream media. And then in the very next clip, they tell you that Fox News is the most trusted and listened to news source in the whole of America. And actually, because obviously competitive advertising is allowed in the US, so they list CNBC, CNN, blah, 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 all of them and their numbers. And Fox News is more than double the next closest rival. So with about 17 million daily listeners, and I think CNN is second with about 8 million. But they like the rest of the media is the mainstream media, obviously. So
and they're part of the Fox Corporation. I mean,
Owned by
you
the
don't get
Murdochs.
bigger than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Built by Roger Ailes.
You don't get more mainstream.
But I mean,
What do we
but
do?
how can you? It's literally side by side. They say those two things. So how does a person watch that and go, okay, these people are credible? Like you're saying you're not the mainstream media, but you're the most listened to in the whole of America.
I can try and frame that. I mean, the judicious Johannes Ludbert is defending Fox News. It's going to snow, boys. Pigs are flying. But I can see the argument, not that I agree with it, being we are a minority of the overall voices. 17 million of 200 million. So we're a minority of the overall voices. And if you add all the other news networks together,
Okay, so I don't
they are
think
30
it's
or
that
40 or
high.
50
I think it's
million.
more that people just don't see the dissonance in that. That it's just
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
And that,
I tried.
it
I'm walking
explains
away from this. Fox
it
News
ex-
does not
it
deserve me to
explains
do
just
anything.
about everything.
I think you might be right, Joe. But that list is not like 200 million. You know, that list came maybe up to 50 million. The list that they put there. So I mean, it's like a
17 or
third
50,
or whatever.
yeah. It's
You know,
34%
so it's
agreed.
huge.
I think mainstream, the word has just become a kind of a slur as well. You know, it's
Like
it's
radical
sort of,
economic transformation, white monopoly capitalism.
Rob makes a very good
Exactly.
point that the connotational political stuff that has been done to that word,
Yeah.
whether it's RET here or mainstream media there, much like the words liberal and conservative in the US, have just been, they have distorted the actual meaning of the word.
A lot of
It's just
a
a
lot of
rallying
words,
call now.
socialism, capitalism. A lot of words are now so loaded, and that's both sides of the aisle, or your preference or whatever, doing that to those words, adopting those words, and going, this is what that means, and saying that over and over and over for 10 years, and eventually people are like, oh, socialism is communism. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
or they want
Or
to
socialism is evil.
Yes.
Socialism
Or
is the
not even
destruction
that,
of
but
healthcare.
like just wanting, basic freedom is socialism,
Yes,
apparently.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Or the inverse. I mean, the guys who are supporting Trump right now and saying, as we'll talk about shortly, stop counting and don't let them steal the vote, they're supporting, quote unquote, the freedom of Americans' right to choose their president. But let me not get in front of that cart
So
horse.
the next thing is adverts. If you watch a lot of CNN or whatever, you see a lot of ads for travel destinations. So come to Croatia. You know, very beautiful shots. They have these. I love CNN's links. They have this link called 30 Seconds of Calm, where it's just like basically like wildebeest grazing on grasslands just for 30 seconds. That's it. No cuts, no voice, no edit, anything. So like very cool stuff like that. And then they also do stuff like Voices for Africa, which some of my friends were involved in. Like very involved, very heartwarming kind of cool stuff as the ads in CNN.
And may I add, forgive me, what I'm hearing on a cold listen to what you're saying is outside of your own country. It's a global thing. It's other countries. It's voices for another continent.
Exactly. And if you watch Fox, I mean, every advert is an infomercial. I'm not shitting you. Like, you know the stuff we used to watch in the 90s before cartoons? Exactly.
big green clean machine.
And it's not like, it doesn't even matter what you're advertising. It's like taking that, it's almost like reality TV, you know? It's a structure, it's a format, and every single advert, it doesn't matter what they're advertising, is in that frickin' format, which just for me is mind-numbing. But anyway, okay.
And
so
I could imagine their 30
then-
seconds of calm being like 30 seconds of Trump being lost in the White House.
Well, here I'm gonna tell you now. So then there's the content of the actual adverts. Okay, so there's Mike Lindell. I don't know if you guys know this guy. He looks like the constable or the police chief from Blue Bloods with much less of a square jawline. So he's got this ridiculous mustache, and he's selling you pillows, mattresses, sheets, like all because you like really struggle to sleep, you know, and your stress levels are huge. So that's the one thing. Probably half of the advertising time of Fox News is taken up by this one fucking douchebag and his fucking pillows, dude. You have to, like, okay, so there's that.
But Neil,
then
think about
hair
it.
loss, obviously, hair loss, fucking, they advertise quite a lot. Anxiety medication, like, just compare those two
Serious white people problems.
Exactly. Christianity, dude. Holy fucking hell. Like, and it's all, like I said, it's all this infomercial thing. Feel like you're lost. Don't know where to go? There is a voice that will fucking comfort you.
If you donate
I
lots
hope
of
it
money.
actually says it.
Call 1-800-PRAY. Like, so there's that. And just to that last point, they still have 1-800 numbers at the end of their ads, dude. Who fucking phones a 1-800 number, man?
It's a time-honored tradition, Neil.
But it's a time-honored tradition, or they're stuck in a fucking time capsule, Andrew. Like, it's just, yeah, it's like in 30 years, nothing has progressed in that side of the argument, you know? People like the 90s, so they were like, fucking, let's just keep those infomercials exactly the same, you know? Let's keep our 1-800 numbers. It also could probably talk to the age bracket of the demographic of the people, the audience. So yeah, I found that really interesting. There are other things. Fox News for the whole week has been reporting the counts incorrectly. I'm sure you know this, Joe. CNN reported on it, and actually some of the Fox News, like not reporters, but like they're kind of their experts or whatever, you know. Some of them came onto Fox News and said, we take exception to you reporting Arizona for Joe Biden. And I think they started doing it when there was still 20% of the vote to count.
Can I jump in here? I've got a story.
Go.
So the Guardian or the New York Times, I forget which, tells the story about one of their reporters who was in very close contact with many people. She's the White House correspondent. So she's in close contact with people in the White House. And she tells the story of, and I preface this by saying, you know, it comes from whence it comes, that when election night happened, so the Tuesday night in the US, the Trump family was sitting in the East Wing of the White House watching the results, which is what a president generally does. And just picture the scene. It's really much the Trump family and kind of his closest echo chamber. And as we know, most states fly for him in the beginning.
Of course.
And then he wins Florida.
The Red Mirage.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And he wins Florida, and this is a big deal. As we know, he can't win without it. And it's reminiscent of his 2016 campaign when he won Florida unexpectedly, and he knew he was in the game.
Yes.
So emotions are high. Oaks are feeling optimistic. And then the great disciple of the Trumpian fallacy, Fox News, calls Arizona for Biden. And as Neil says, this is fairly early. I think 80+% was counted at the time. Hang on. So Jared Kushner phones Rupert Murdoch. Can we just take a step back to your point about we are not the mainstream media? The president's son-in-law and close advisor picks up the phone to the guy who owns this outfit. And one can imagine what happened on the call. The call didn't change. The Arizona call didn't change. Other point is I have found Fox News' map wonderfully refreshing because I have the Financial Times, the New York Times, and the Fox map up kind of on 3 screens most of the time. And watching how different these things are, Fox has a light blue, dark blue, and a light red, dark red map. So the dark colors are ones that are already won, and the light colors are ones they are proposing to win. And 48 hours ago, the Fox map had 4 wonderful pink ones called Michigan, and Wisconsin, and Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Today, they are all either dark blue or light blue. And just telling you that story again gives me childish wonderment.
So something interesting, you mentioned Rupert Murdoch. A couple of weeks ago, there was a story on him predicting a Biden win, actually.
Really?
Which I thought was, there wasn't any context to the piece on whether he was saying that as in it was like a threat to his organization or something like that, but it seemed more that, you know, they were basically preparing for it and saying, okay, well, you know, how do we pivot from this?
But it's, that Arizona count really, really fucks me off because
Why?
because you've been staring at the same numbers for 3 days, right? Really. Like,
So I unfortunately disagree.
No, not state by state. I'm saying overall the Electoral College numbers has been the same number for 3-4 days. And the fact that you can't even agree on what is done, because that is what that number should encapsulate. Not, sure, have the heat map and fucking whatever, that's fine. But when you start, like, they almost, like we were saying about Tucker Carlson last week, they almost, like, I feel like prepping for the conspiracy. You know what I mean? They adding the drama themselves, and there's no credibility there. CNN wouldn't do that. As whatever your views on the left or the right or the center or whatever the fuck, CNN would never do that. They would never call a state when there's 20% of the votes still to count. And it fucks me off.
Can I propose an alternative vision? You needn't buy into it, and knowing Neil, ladies and gentlemen, and the
at
fiery
you.
look he's
I'm gonna
giving
fucking
me.
throw something at you.
What is Fox News paying you?
I cannot believe I am actually blushing,
This is
ladies
twice
and gentlemen.
now.
that
Twice
I'm
in
a
10
situation
minutes,
where
bro.
I am looking at I can't. So it's not a pro Fox News thing. It's just a different view on the Arizona call. So Fox News, one, they are factually correct. I'm looking at the New York Times map now. Arizona's 97% counted. Joe Biden leads by roughly 1% of the total vote.
Okay, but Joe, sorry, 4 days ago that was not the case. So making that point now,
4
I'm
days
sorry.
ago, they hadn't voted yet,
Okay.
firstly.
Okay, Wednesday morning they already called
So
Arizona.
I'm not going to argue that point further. I'm just going to say that they were right. Okay. And
No,
remember
Joe,
that they were right
excuse
for
me,
the other guy.
excuse me, they were not right, Joe. They were not right. Now they're right.
So they were right then. He was ahead.
No.
He's still ahead. They said he's going to win it.
Joe,
He's going to win
Joe,
it.
I'm sorry, there's a technicality here.
Mm-hmm.
Saying people are going to win it, you don't put it in the count, okay? Do you get me? Saying you propose, saying you think, saying you postulate, you whatever, that is one thing. Putting it in the count before the count is finished and the other person can still lead. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not.
So difference of opinion?
They happened to be right when all of the things were counted. They were fucking dead wrong when they did.
I have a last thing, and then I'm happy
Okay,
to
okay.
shut it down. Perhaps a difference of framing is that is what they do in every state, every election.
I know that.
So 90% of calls are always made before the count's finished. And thus, I am less upset that Fox made a call, because that's what everyone does. Fox made it early, and we disagree on them making it early, and I get that. But to say that calling it before it's all counted is not the done thing is wrong. You with me?
Okay, but the only time CNN would call it is when the loser has no way to catch up based on the percentage of votes. So that's a logical way to do it.
I get you.
What they did is they just threw that out the window and said, yeah, Biden won it. And they've never changed it, even though their anchors came on and said, we take exception to you doing this, even though CNN reported, and I didn't even see that story, but CNN reported on Fox News for 2 days, reporting incorrect electoral college vote numbers. Even after all of that, they refused to change it. So, yeah, I understand that it's all kind of it's all based on averages and predictions, and I understand that. But if a person has any chance of catching up to the leader, then you can't call the state, and that's what they've done. A lot of and that's what Fox News does as well. That's why they didn't call the other states like Pennsylvania, Georgia. So by their own logic, they shouldn't have called Arizona. Okay,
I got nothing more.
Moving along. So I think it was on Wednesday. I basically watched Fox News the whole day. And they only showed ticker tapes, the ticker tape at the bottom with the states. The only states they showed for about 6 hours was Trump won states, so none of the Biden states. So I thought that was quite interesting. They talk about stuff like the mail-in ballot system that they've never done before, Andrew, never in history. But actually, it's fucking like 100 years old in the US.
That's how Trump votes every year.
Exactly. Then they talk about big tech, big media, like a conspiracy theories, fucking the othering, love it. And yeah, so that's interesting. Kellyanne Conway turning around yesterday and saying, no, Trump didn't claim victory on election night.
Alternative fact.
Talking about big oil. I mean, the list kind of goes on. Democratic counting cabals.
The Biden crime family.
Yeah. That's a huge one now. And then just kind of finally, just as a sub kicker, I love the fact that Trump's Twitter account has been suspended.
Has it been suspended?
It's been suspended.
Oh, that's the cherry on the cake.
So they started by doing a lot of his tweets, because obviously a lot of his tweets were claiming states and fucking talking a lot of shit. And basically every one of them was flagged and grayed out, so you couldn't see it. And then I think yesterday afternoon, they suspended his account. But I just want to say to you, Twitter, fuck you with the rest of them, my boy. Because firstly, you stand for free speech. Now you're silencing someone. Okay, we can have a whole argument about that. But secondly, it's been 4 fucking years, bros. You could have done something, but you're too shit scared to stand up to this person.
You
and
could
now
also
you're
argue,
like fucking doing it.
I agree with you, because you could also argue if he was ahead, they
Yes,
wouldn't be shutting
of course.
him down. And
No, just
you
going
could make that argument.
going with the flow, and then Fox News talks about big tech. Well, big tech supporting your frickin' president.
Yeah. Could I?
That's my little bit.
Firstly, I'd just like to observe to my colleagues, not Neil, but the other two and our listeners.
Thanks,
I
Joe.
think the reason Mr. de Villiers is so irate is he's been watching Fox News the whole time. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. The second point is...
It is tough.
Of course.
It's very tough. It's difficult.
I get that. That's why I take my Fox News poison with a little bit of mainstream media antidote, and then it's easier to digest.
It's starting to make a lot of sense why all these Fox News viewers want to just buy guns and go out into the streets.
So would I.
Sorry, Andrew, just for our listeners' sake and maybe for our own sake as well, when listeners, we were prepping for the show, it was actually Neil who said, like Rassie Erasmus to the Springboks in a good halftime talk, pre-game talk, we must not demonize the other side. And it doesn't serve the narrative to just completely write off the other side. So let me add that kind of spice to the conversation. May I propose to quickly give us all an election standing update, just so we know where we're at. So at the time of speaking, it is 10:14 in South Africa. That is 3:14 a.m. Eastern Time, which is the Washington, New York time zone. The Electoral College vote is 253. That is the non-Arizona vote on the New York Times and Financial Times website.
No, but Fox News is right, Joe.
But they are. I mean, he's going to win Arizona. But moving on, 253 have been called by mainstream media for Biden and 214 for Donald Trump. I'll remind our listeners you need 270 to win. 270 in the middle of your mind, to the left, 253. That's not very far away, right? That's 17. To the right, 214. That's quite a way. That's 56 votes. Then, if I can ask us all to please visualize a map of the United States in your mind on the right
Well,
hand.
at least you're not asking Americans to visualize a map of anywhere except America. South Africans can manage a map of the United States, I think.
That's the one that's shaped like a boot, right?
Little islands all over the place.
And
Florida's
on
a
this
little
map,
penis. That's how I remember it.
So very good. Florida, described as it just has been, is to the far right, and to the far left, you've got California. What I'd like to ask you then is just inside of California, literally bordering on it on the left, are 2 states, Nevada, that's where Las Vegas is, and Arizona. Both Nevada and Arizona are most likely to be called for Mr. Biden.
Yeah.
If Biden wins these 2, he wins 2. He has exactly 270 votes. Game over. Thanks for playing. On the far right-hand side of the map, there are 3 other states, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. And just picture 3 grey blocks almost against the coast. In fact, 3 of them are on the far right-hand side. Pennsylvania alone puts Biden over. So he could either win the 2 on the left, he's through, or he could just win Pennsylvania, and he's through. If Trump does not win Pennsylvania, he cannot win the White House. It's over. And then there's North Carolina and Georgia. If Trump wins all 3 of these, he still can't win the election.
There is... sorry, Joe.
I'll just quickly give you numbers,
go
if I
for
may. Nevada is 93% counted. Biden is ahead by a very decent margin of 1.8%. For our listeners, anything over 1 in the American context, especially this election, is a big number. So 1.8 is like double a decent margin. Arizona, which we've discussed, is 97% counted with 48.7 for Donald Trump and 49.6 for Biden. So it's less than 1%. It's 0.9% that he's ahead. Georgia, 98% counted, and Joe's ahead. Pennsylvania, and if you give me time later, I don't want to bore you guys. This is the great drama of this election amongst many others. Pennsylvania, Joe Biden is leading. 48 hours ago, Trump's lead in a state with roughly 7 million votes. Trump's lead was 1 million votes. That's 15% of the total vote. The New York Times has this great heat map where it's a line descending on the chart by day. Anyway, 1 million votes lead has disintegrated, and Biden is now ahead by less than 30,000 votes. I remind you, there are 7 million people voting.
I think last night, Pennsylvania was like, Georgia. We were speaking to, Georgia. Georgia was like 900 votes that Biden was ahead. It's insane.
Crazy. I have goosebumps as we have this discussion.
It's insane how close it's been, really.
So
do
for
they
the sake
take the
of
weekend
context,
off? Sorry to jump in. Do they
go.
take the weekend off
I
to
doubt it.
when the
Hulle
counters?
I doubt it.
nie die nag af nie.
Yeah.
I heard they were working from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and I was like, dudes, that's not good enough.
No, but I don't think. I think they count. That's probably a shift,
Yeah,
Andrew,
I
and
think
then
so.
the night shift comes in.
I'm not
I
sure,
hope
but I think so. The big so just 2 points to our listeners. As we stand here today, I declare my bias. I want Joe Biden to win. We can talk about why. It is very, very unlikely that Trump wins. Why? He's got to win all those states on the right-hand side. I'll remind you that he's losing in 2 out of the 3, although it's razor thin. And he's got to flip one on the left. And if even someone as biased as Fox News is calling Arizona, it's unlikely he's going to flip that, and he's comfortably ahead of Nevada. So I pray literally to whatever deity that I may believe in. I know who that is. I'm just not getting spiritual on the show because that's controversial. I think Joe Biden's got it. And then, last point. I take great glee, and this is not professional and it's not objective, in knowing that Donald Trump is watching himself be massacred on an international public pyre of disgrace because that man cannot stomach to be branded a loser. And that is what is happening. And as long as this goes on and it continues and it drags out so obviously that he's going to lose, the more pleasure I get because the more pain I anticipate he's getting. Okay, I'm done.
I heard a great kind of analogy of what he's doing, which is proving that he was never taught to be a good loser after losing a game of Monopoly.
Apparently, I've heard there's a truck circling the White House with the word loser on it.
That's fucking hilarious.
You're fired.
Andrew, you wanted to talk election predictions, I think.
Yes. So I don't remember exactly where all of us were. I predicted Biden winning, followed by horrific white supremacist terror attacks.
Okay.
So I think I'm still on track, actually.
Yeah, congratulations. You might be the only one.
I think hopefully I'm wrong, but I think things are building, and I think when there's a final announcement, there's a good chance that there's going to be some poo on the fan. According to the FBI, white supremacy is the most significant domestic terror threat in the US. Donald Trump Jr. has called for total war.
Yes, I saw that.
In his father's defense now. Previously, he called for supporters to form an army to secure the election. And he's also said recently his dad must fight these battles to the death. So the rhetoric is there. Steve Bannon.
Lol.
Banned,
This
I
is
think,
hilarious.
I presume permanently from Twitter. He called for Anthony Fauci, obviously quite famous now.
Head on a spike, eh?
Yeah.
Is that the story?
Anthony Fauci and Christopher Wray, the FBI director.
Actually,
he wants
said
them
head on a
beheaded.
spike. I
Head
mean,
on a
that's-
spike.
He said they should have their heads put on pikes at the White House as a warning to other, quote, federal bureaucrats. Okay, so he's upping the rhetoric as well. There was a fake warning going around, fortunately fake. It was supposed to be from the NAACP about white supremacists conducting initiation violence this weekend. So for new people to join the group, they go out and do something violent.
Which group, Andrew? What?
That it was a general thing, but that was fake news.
Oh, okay.
So it didn't come from the NAACP, which is a progressive organization, yeah. Some QAnon guys were arrested in Pennsylvania on the way to the convention center. There was a tip-off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, guys with QAnon stickers all over their Humvee and assault rifles and so on. So they managed to intercept them at least.
Yes, please.
And otherwise, there've been a couple of victims actually on the right wing side. I think it was outside the White House that 3 men and 1 woman who identify as members of the ultra right wing Proud Boys group were stabbed.
By?
And Well, I guess because they're dicks and people don't like them.
No, but I think Joe actually
who
means by
stabbed
who.
them?
Yes. Yeah.
Originally, the police said they think it's Black Lives Matter activists. They now say they don't know who it is. They're basically just making that up.
Are we 100% sure it happened, the stabbing?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
yes,
we
yes,
know
yeah.
as a fact.
I
Q
can
and
probably
Robbie-
say
Andrew
there's
fact
an-
checks himself.
I can probably say there's a 99% chance that they probably like stabbed themselves or trying to figure out how to open up their knives.
Yeah, dude, it's the same thing that I was talking about, like that bomber whose truck was covered in Trump stickers, and the Republicans taking that as a sign that it was the Democrats that did it, like that same fucking like reverse kind of intuition or whatever.
So my prediction was for a Biden win, and then within the first 2 years of his presidency, he either gets incapacitated or passes
dies.
away.
Yes.
And Kamala Harris becomes the president, which is, I
You're on
confess,
track.
what I
You're
hope
on
for.
track.
I like that. I
And,
like that as well.
yeah, I still feel like I'm on track for that. I mean,
I predicted a Trump win, and I am narrowly fucking wrong. And I don't really. Yeah, we should get into this.
What
It is
motivated your vote?
disturbing how many people voted for him. It is after 4 years of seeing what he did, after fucking up the coronavirus in the highest manner, the highest possible way that he could do it. He did it. And people are like, yeah, no, that's my president.
yeah, look, that's absolutely what's been the scariest thing for me around this, because
Yeah.
I really felt that in 2016, people were voting for an unknown entity, and it was this
Exactly.
idea of anything is better than this entrenched kind of
Elitism
elitism
or whatever,
that we
yeah.
have.
Exactly.
But now it's a known entity, and
yeah.
they're still voting for it.
May I? I've got lots of data here. Is this the time?
Go.
So my household, for those of you in the listener
Looking at
group,
me like I'm a fucking juror,
I'm
dude.
just asking, I'm just
a
asking permission from the
conversation.
chairman. So my household don't really do sport, although the recent Springbok Chasing the Sun has had us all crying for 5 hours straight, but not going there. We do politics. We do politics with great glee and joy, and generally a good Cabernet Sauvignon or a Shiraz, maybe a Pinot on a hot day. And we've been quite perturbed.
Integral information, Joe. Thank
Yes.
you. Thanks.
Stories need
Thanks.
spice. And we've been kind of perplexed by exactly that question, Neil, over the last week specifically, because I gave us a bunch of numbers. 68 odd million people. It's now 70.2 million people voted for Donald Trump.
Which is the highest absolute amount that has ever voted for any candidate in the US ever.
Didn't know that.
It
Okay.
is.
So
When it was 68 million, it was
the
already.
highest.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
they were
And then-
saying that Trump in this election's got more than Obama got in either of his
Yes.
elections.
Yeah.
So it is record turnout. So
Yeah,
just to
sure,
give you the
sure.
numbers,
No,
it's
obviously,
74.4
but it's still
million
it's still
Biden,
scary that,
and
that
70.2
it's the
million.
highest absolute number ever.
Well, that
for
implies
a-
that it's second highest because Biden has more.
No, obviously,
Yeah,
both
no,
of them are
just-
record
yeah,
breakers.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
So to match to agree with you, we were quite perturbed by
Okay.
why do 70.2 million people, it is roughly half of the 140 something million, vote for this guy. And that took us on a fascinating kind of journey, because you very easily start with they're white, they're racist, they are everything Hillary Clinton described with the word deplorable. And I want to open the idea that is actually not the case.
Okay, so I wouldn't start there, and anyone who does start there is probably wrong.
Good.
Like
Good.
So
So for the listeners,
So I wouldn't start there at all. I would say misguided is a word that I would use. Lied to and believing any crap they see
I would
on
even
TV
start with the fact that
is
there is so many different groups of people voting for him for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I heard, which was didn't even expect, is that in places like Florida, where what people describe as the Latina community have become quite pro-Trump because of his very hardened attitude to politicians in South America.
yes.
And so you've got these people who want that attitude towards these leaders of the countries that they came from, feeling that he is providing something that they want.
I can't
that's
agree
a-
more. So just to outline the argument, then we can dive into it, is exactly what you guys have said, and I'm quite proud of my co-host that you didn't anchor on the kind of white racist thing to start. There are various, to echo what Rob said, there are various different kind of panels to the umbrella of his support. And I just wanted to throw a couple out there. So there are working class people who have voted Democrat for a very long time. And I can cite podcasts and interviews and stuff, all of this, who voted anti-Democrat in 2016 because they feel left behind.
Yeah.
And the obvious example is Pennsylvania.
And I think that I think that's probably in my mind, that is the largest proportion of the reason for the numbers that you are seeing is the Democrats have been doing the same thing over and over for years and years, and they're elitists, and that breeds fascism, you know? I mean, it should have, in 2016, it should have been Bernie, and this year it should have been fucking Bernie again. Because if you saw something like Bernie, I think you probably would have seen a lot of those people who in 2016 voted for Trump would have voted for him because they need change. Forget the fucking placards and the adverts and all of that shit. They need things to change. They can't put up with this bullshit anymore. So if you had Bernie versus Trump, I think you would have had two outliers, and I think Bernie would have walked it. But then the DNC, and like exactly into what all of these people believe, the DNC kind of squashed the Bernie thing. And then they lost the election.
I think that Bernie's unfortunately been branded as this idea of like a socialist, and Americans are too befuck scared of the idea of communism or socialism without actually understanding it and understanding the policies.
Can I take a step back just before I'm worried to get too deep into the Sanders rabbit hole, but I think Neil makes exactly the right point, and I think Rob, you've made it as well, that the majority of those 70.2 million people are people who are varying degrees of disenfranchised all the way through to angry with the existing system. Yeah. And both Clinton and Biden are the existing system. Let's remember that Biden was the vice president of Obama, who was the
Clinton,
Democrat for
obviously.
And Clinton was the Secretary of State,
but it's not even,
ex-First Lady.
I think it's not even about that for them, Joe. It's about Nancy Pelosi. What the fuck is that person still doing there? She has no clue, man. You watch what she says and you're like, what? Like, no wonder they can't appeal to the youth. No wonder they can't frickin', no wonder they quashed the Bernie Sanders thing. And then you start understanding why people feel the way they feel and why they vote the way they vote. At least initially. Now, I agree with you, Rob. Now it's fucking scary. Because now you've tasted that shit pudding, like literally poo baked into a pie, put into an oven. Now you've tasted that, and you're like, yes, I'll have some more of that.
So one other thing I would like thing I would like to point out is that I think there have been things that have happened which, for a lot of these voters, felt like real progress. There has been things that have happened. I mean, things like, for instance, and whether you attribute it to Trump or not, I think is debatable. I mean, things like the tax breaks and the fact that the unemployment, he did preside over the lowest unemployment rate in history. And I mean, okay, so I'm not saying that is the making. Trump did that.
Of course not. But it did happen.
But that's the thing. These are things that happened during his presidency. Also, the fact that for the first time in decades, there's been real wage growth amongst the lowest paid employees in America.
May I jump in just very briefly? I'll hand the mic back or hand the floor back. So the New York Times did great work, and I say it's them because remember, they are not fans of this guy, where they put together a list of what were the promises made on the campaign trail that were delivered on. And let's go. Taxes. Yes, taxes were cut for the wealthy, but they were dramatically cut for the middle class as well. More for the rich, but you're a middle class guy, you got more money. Regulation. Regulation was dramatically cut, and I'm looking at Andrew specifically. That's probably a bad thing for the world, green, energy, blah, 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 but it was done. Immigration. We can go on endlessly about whether immigration's right or wrong. Neil's already getting worked up, I get that. No. But the point is he made that promise, and he made it a really scary thing to come into the US. Military spending is up quite dramatically. There's the matter of the wall. I can spend a whole 20 minutes on it. Let's just say that he did build more wall. Was it right? Was it good? Was it paid for by Mexico? No. Was a lot of it in the same place as the previous wall? Yes. But he did put up a lot more wall, and if that's your thing, that's your thing. And then here's the big one. Judges. Donald J. Trump has appointed more judges to the entire system than any other person.
Please, let's
ever.
Not get in this.
Okay, we're not getting into that.
This is terrible. It makes
so
my
I
brain
think the
hurt.
point that both Joe and I are making is that for the average voter who voted for him in 2016, there has felt like real progress. There has felt like something has actually happened and they have benefited in some way. Whether it's real or not is
it's an emotional response.
Yeah, so I think that is just all we're trying to say is that part of the scary part is that there has been this perception of people getting something from this
And
president.
I would go further and say it's not a perception. I mean, all the things I've just mentioned.
Sure. Okay. Look, as I say,
real.
there's what people feel.
It is about
yeah.
what people feel.
Yeah.
That is what
And I
it's
think
about.
if we then put it in two very broad buckets, there's the bucket of disenfranchisement, which has a long emotional spectrum. And there's the bucket of he is deplorable. In fact, many interviews, the Washington Post did about 36 interviews with people who voted in 2016 and voted again in 2020, and they'd give you your 2016 thoughts on him and ask you to critique it and respond today. It's great reading.
Oh, that's excellent.
It is brilliant. Many of them say, I find this man deplorable. Many of them are women. Many of them are educated women. I find him deplorable, but he has delivered on things that are important to me. And if you've got that on the one side and disenfranchisement on the other, suddenly 70.2 million of those votes start to make a lot more sense.
The problem also, I think, is the painting of certain issues in certain lights so that people start feeling emotive about them, and then he goes, I solved it. You know what I mean? When actually it was never an issue to start with, you know? Like the whole thing, the trade war with China, worst fucking idea ever. Did he return fucking jobs to the US? No.
I've got data. Can I give you
Entire
quick data?
companies in the US closed down because they couldn't get Chinese steel anymore. Companies that have been around for 120 years moved their operations to Europe because, and like Harley Davidson was an example. If you enter synthesizers, Moog, Robert Moog's company, like true American, amazing heritage like company that was built up by Americans over time, employed thousands of people. Said, okay, well, dude, if we can't import parts from China, we can't operate in America. But people in the steel industry, for example, in the States, believe yes, that was a good thing, and it's lack of information, I think. Sorry.
No, not sorry. Just a quick data point. When Donald Trump took office in January of 2017, the US trade deficit with China was $31 billion. When Donald Trump ran for re-election a month ago, the US trade deficit with China was $31 billion. His effect on Chinese trade deficit was zero. But in the process, he destroyed all these jobs.
Not only that, he destroyed the relationship.
Yeah.
He just, in a huge way. I mean, he destroyed the fucking relationship. And you know what? China doesn't need the US, man. They export to the rest of the world too. Like, they don't need the US. The US does need China to be able to manufacture all their very fancy Macintoshes and the rockets that go in Elon Musk's fucking, like, spaceships and all of that shit. They need China. China doesn't need the US.
Interesting one to kind of tie into that, and then I'm going to shut up a bit because I'm hogging the floor. Sorry, guys. Is one of the things he didn't deliver on was bringing jobs back. So coming off that same point, was bringing jobs back specifically in the industrial sectors. And they then play a series of clips of Trump's speeches, and he mentions Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, all of which he won in 2016. They are normally staunchly Democratic. They flipped for him. And this year, he has already lost Michigan and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And those were the two in the drama of the last 3 days, which, when they flipped, closed off almost all doors to a Trump presidency.
100%.
So that his chickens have come home to roost there.
Yes, yeah. So the people who were voting on that issue, that particular issue, have now seen that it is a shit pudding. And in fact, I won't have any more of it, Andrew.
Well, more for me. I think when we see these strange decisions that don't seem to make sense, sometimes the answer is in the real constituency or constituencies of these parties, which are the donors. Those are the first people you need to please, the party donors. And then the electorate is really secondary because you use that donor money to put your message out. I think, for example, perhaps Trump was taking all kinds of money from the steel industry, so he didn't care if he screwed over the people who needed to buy from China. The people who needed to sell steel perhaps were just donating more to him, and that was it. You know, everyone else can be sacrificed. They're disposable. I think also in terms of why some people voted for Trump, there's a clue in the geography. There must be, because people on the coasts and in the big cities are voting Biden, and people in rural areas Trump. And it kind of reminds me a bit of our kind of farm murder types as well, because they are rural types. And you said on a previous episode, Neil, you drive just a little bit out of the city, and the culture changes very quickly.
Yep.
Maybe that's isolation. Maybe that's the echo chamber.
You've got your cable, and what do you watch? You watch Fox News, and you have to fucking watch Mike Lindell and the ferret resting on his lip, trying to sell you fucking magical fucking pillows or whatever.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point, because that's very similar to the demographics around Brexit.
Definitely.
As soon as you went out of the cities where immigration was less of a problem, and the bad effects of, I mean, I shouldn't say that overwhelmingly, but yeah, it does follow the
But
same
I mean, there are
demographics.
so many congruencies between Trump, the Republicans, and the Tories, man. Not least of which is they're
Bad hair.
elitists
And the DA.
bad hair. Not least of which is there are elitists who manage to lie to lower and middle LSM people and convince them that they will make policies for them and turn around in government and fucking just don't. Like, it's so stark in my head that the Tories managed to do that in England, and that Trump, who is the elitist, the definition of a person who was born into privilege, and squandered all of it, and he can convince people in fucking South Missouri or wherever the fuck it is on the like canals there that this person is gonna fight for me.
Yeah, look, I think we kind of doubling back to where we were. There's
Another congruency
interesting
which
dynamics,
I'd
yeah.
like to ask Rob to shed some light on is the congruency with the South African electorate, where you also see a very different election outcome in urbanized, educated centers, as Andrew pointed out, versus rural. Mr. Cass, you have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so not necessarily elaborating on that exactly, but we do see a lot of that in South Africa. I mean, for instance, the ANC strongholds in rural areas, and how that, when in the last couple of elections, they've come very close to losing or have lost in a lot of cities, and yet they maintain these strongholds in the rural areas. But something in the lead up to this election that I thought was very interesting is a lot of the local commentary, listening to radio. And so I've been traveling a lot lately, and I've been listening to radio, which is not something I do very often, but have been recently. And it's been very interesting to me. And I kind of recall it around the last election as well, that so many South Africans, and this, spans race as well, are so pro-Trump, with this idea that he gets things done. He's a man of the people.
It even spans ideology, hey, Rob?
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that interests me the most, particularly about South Africans being so supportive of him, is how destructive Trump has been for South Africa in particular, but for Africa in general. I mean, a lot of the things that we benefit from in our relationship with the US, he has sought to undermine, and has in a lot of cases
100%.
Undermined as well. So it's actually it's not in our best interest for a Trump presidency. Yet ideologically, a lot of people love him in South Africa, and I think that's partly fascinating. And then one of the other things I've long thought is fascinating is how many South Africans love Trump but hate Zuma. And I've always thought this was really funny, because there's so many parallels. And I mean, particularly now, if you look at what Trump has done in the last few months, and the big one for me is the whole idea of leading up to this election, knowing that the postal vote was going to be a big factor, knowing that if it was easier for people to vote, it's long been well known that if it's easier for people to vote, if more people vote, the Democrats will win. It's everyone knows it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Republicans on record saying that if they allow mail-in ballots en masse, if they make it easier for people to vote, they will never win again.
Yeah.
They've said it. And so just
Go for it.
So I mean, what Trump has sought to do is he replaced the head of the U.S. Postal Service. And with a mandate
Defunded
to undermine
them and
the postal
defunded
service.
them.
This guy
Yeah.
went about undermining the postal
Yes.
service. great Jacob Zuma tactic. He went and undermined every organization in South Africa that could hold him and his cronies accountable.
Definitely.
And there's so many. Okay, so that's a direct parallel. And it's something I always like to present to when people go, oh, Trump is great. And you're like, well, how do you feel about Zuma? Oh, I fucking hate Zuma. Yeah, ruined this country. And you're like, well, these are all the similarities in how they have operated. The nepotism, the undermining of institutions, the sowing doubt. I mean, Zuma was...
Of course.
He built his whole political career
of course.
on sowing doubt on institutions and anything that stood against him. So you just say, oh, no, it's fake. I mean, Zuma always, white monopoly capital. I'm against that.
And I mean, what is, and to your point, they've been prepping for that mail-in ballot thing for months.
Yeah, but that's
5 months. They've been saying, it's never been done before, like I mentioned. They're still saying that. Yeah. They still saying that.
It's absolutely what Zuma did, creating this boogeyman. And they're the same. It's the same character.
Actually, he is the fucking boogeyman.
Exactly.
It's like
flesh that out.
And so, I mean, I kind of feel that a lot of people that have been listening to us up to this point will know that we really don't like Trump. So if you're listening to this, you probably don't like Trump as well.
Yeah.
And what I would encourage, if you encounter someone who is a Trump supporter, I mean, we've tried to say it. Don't be, don't try and offend them or anything like that. But I think it's interesting to present these arguments to say, like, well, how do you feel about Zuma? Oh, I don't like Zuma. Why don't you like him? Because he did this and this and this and this. Okay, but Trump has done all of those same things. Why do you think he's okay? And this thing, people, for the reasons they do like Trump, may not they might not take that into their consideration, but they should. He's not, when people are voting for him, they're saying, oh, well, I'm voting for him for this one thing that he has done for me. But what about all this other stuff that has gone against you and gone against the world at large? You can't just not consider that. And I think if you present it that way, I think it makes a pretty compelling argument.
Definitely. Yeah, it's scary. And I mean, you could also probably draw the parallels between Trump and the EFF, Oh,
absolutely. Demagogues.
Yeah, I mean, anything to take a headline, basically, is the EFF's motto, and that's the Trump motto as well. It doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter what I do, as long as I'm there, as long as I'm in the news. I'll pull a gun on a fucking reporter. I'll smack someone in the face who's like a security guard, or like what was that one thing, Julius?
Well, I mean,
he pulled a gun in a crowd.
The number of times that they've assaulted journalists as well.
Yeah,
called everyone fake news. It's exactly the same thing. If you undermine everything, and then your supporters get to do the same thing. Yeah. Anything that doesn't agree with their worldview, you just ignore it, or you claim that it's not real.
Yeah.
We have a saying, listeners, between the four of us that we've been chatting about a lot the last few weeks, which is the prosecuted paint themselves as the persecuted. And I would kind of add to Rob's point that just as Trump has set up these conspiracy theories and made this world, this reality where he's the good guy who's getting persecuted, what's actually happening is the legitimate systems of law, or in this case electoral order, are voting him out. And Zuma's doing the same in SA. He's saying there's, firstly he did RET, Radical Economic Transformation, and White Monopoly Capital, but now with the Zondo Commission he's saying, no, there's a conspiracy, etc. I'm being persecuted for political reasons. He did the same thing with the spy tapes. That's how he got them thrown out the first time. But actually it is legitimate prosecution.
So do you reckon we might get the Trump version of Zooming with the Zoomers?
Woohoo!
I think I think we are going to see the Trump version of the Zondo Commission, dude. You're definitely going to see that.
Toying with the Trumps. I could see that.
There is going to be legal process as soon as that guy is out of office, and I think he knows, because there's so many things that he did that was illegal, and the kind of way, it's not necessarily the legal system in the US, but it's more the court of public opinion, how that works in the US, is that you can't really put the president on trial. You know what I mean?
Well, he was impeached, we forget. Earlier this year. I forgot that until I redid my stuff this morning.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was impeached, but that's not a criminal case.
No, but it is in your words, a public trial. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just kind of mentioning that the system did
I suppose,
try to hold him to account, but couldn't.
I suppose.
Because the system is corrupted by its own self-interest.
I think you're going to see a lot of that now come out. If he loses, you're going to see a lot of kind of court cases starting to come out.
I'm going to put a nice bottle of something on. Neil drinks whiskey, so six wines versus one good whiskey.
Okay.
Not because I want to be confrontational, but I
you
think
don't see it.
I think it is quite unique in our country for the people in power to appoint someone to look at the people in power. And I don't think that current United States can do that. And I would posit as my examples the failed impeachment, and the second one is the Mueller inquiry. The Mueller inquiry was a version of Zondo. I mean, not quite, but and it just didn't. It made very damning findings that just got destroyed by the political, specifically congressional and Senate situation. But I mean, that's just a thought. So let's see.
Let's move on. Who's next, boys?
I think let me jump in with a little bit of comic relief. I think it's got a bit heavy here. So here's a little story to really warm the heart. I think
I need a warm heart.
I think it's really beautiful. So thousands of Donald Trump supporters unwittingly found themselves on a Facebook group called Gay Communist for Socialism. And the way this happened is there's been, obviously in the wake of this election, a bunch of Facebook groups opening up with things like, Stop the Steal is what they called it. And so someone opened a group called Stop the Steal. And a lot of these had been closed down. I mean, one I think they said had 350,000 members. They got shut down. So someone else opened up another group called Stop the Steal, got 40,000 followers, and then changed the name to Gay Communists for Socialism. And my favorite part of this story, which describes, and I know we said that we're not going to make fun of Trump supporters, but I think there's a particular group of Trump supporters that just makes me laugh, because all of a sudden a whole bunch of people found themselves on this group. And their responses were not to just
Give us
get
the name
themselves
of the
off
group
it.
again?
Gay Communist
for Socialism. So there were a bunch of comments after they changed the name, like, what the hell happened to Stop the Steal? Why is this group called Gay Communists for Socialism? While others demanded, get me off this page.
Get me off this page when you can just unlike it.
Just get
I demand that you get me off this page, Andrew.
But I mean, this is the kind of stuff that really makes me happy, when people play pranks.
But just like, it is a prank, obviously, but that was taken from the Russian hacking story. What people would do when in the 2016 election, and this is fact. This is not conjecture. This is not progressive fucking rubbish or anything like that. People would start groups with some sort of like arbitrary kind of, okay, this is not obviously arbitrary, but like something like Homer Simpson memes or whatever, you know? Then they would like mine that data and see, okay, cool, yeah, this group and these people joined it, and then they change it to like whatever, pro-life fucking whatever. And people didn't even recognize that the group's name changed. They didn't even recognize that, oh shit, all of a sudden there's something in my feed that wasn't there before. You know what I mean? Like, I'm following this page and I don't know where they came from.
Well,
they just like take it as gospel and keep swiping.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is not even that, but if you're not looking all the time, if you're a member of 100 groups, all of a sudden it starts changing your feed to feed you different things.
Definitely.
And it's not necessarily that you consciously realize it. And I think it's interesting, quite a few episodes ago, we talked about behavioral economics and how that ties into this, where, once you're part of a group, you're not likely to get out of it.
Yes.
The active choice to get out of it is a conscious decision, which a lot of people don't make.
Yes.
And it takes advantage of that.
It also talks to priming, to anchoring,
absolutely.
and also to that kind of subconscious, constant, subliminal kind of thing. If you don't get out of those groups, eventually that stuff sits in your fucking brain. Whether you believe it or not, you're going to be like, oh, I saw this thing somewhere, and it must have been from a credible source, because everything that it's in my brain is from a credible source. No, well, like that's
well, I mean, what could be more credible?
Point.
What could be more credible than gay communists for socialism?
I mean, except for the fact that they're two differing ideologies, I agree with you. So, did you guys see the Stephen Colbert breakdown episode?
I didn't.
I'd just like to talk about that for like a second, because I think when these kind of comedians break down, I feel like comedians might be the strongest people some of the strongest people, most hardened people in the whole world. And obviously for someone like that, or John Oliver when he broke down in the Black Lives Matter episode, for someone like that actually to do that and to show like real core emotion, because usually it's not easy, but usually it kind of just flips to humor, like pull the humor in it, pull the humor out of it. So, and that's what those people's audiences want to see. But to see them actually on live television, literally going, like throwing out their monologue and going, actually, this is now fucking enough. Like, I'm being serious. And so basically he starts it all off in standard Colbert fashion, sporting a black golf shirt and slacks. Very, very sexy. And then right at the beginning of the episode, he starts talking about Trump's press briefing on Thursday. I think it was, no, it must have been Wednesday morning South African time. He says the president just stood up and lied for 15 minutes, so nothing really new there. But casting a dark shadow over everything that democracy and the US ostensibly stands for. And then Colbert actually breaks down and takes literally 30 seconds of live airtime. Now, just to give you like a little bit of that's probably $1 million worth of advertising time.
If not much more.
That 30 seconds, right? He literally takes 30 seconds to compose himself.
Was he punching the wall? Was he
crying?
crying?
No,
How did this look?
He was crying, dude. Like, not crying, but literally, like, you could see that he had the whole thing prepared and the teleprompter is like going, and he literally like just puts his hand on the couch that he's standing above and holds the bridge of his nose, and
choking
he's
up,
just literally, and he says everyone predicted the red mirage, which is that Republicans would be seen leading by huge margins, and then the Democrats would catch up based on the huge amounts of mail-in ballots, and predicted what that would do if it happened. What he says he didn't expect was for it to hurt so damn much. What Trump has done. I think it's also probably for someone like that, like you kind of feel like you're on the forefront, or I feel like people like that are on the forefront of saying this is wrong, what you're doing is not right, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And carrying that thing with you as like any normal, real human being. You carry that responsibility with you, and especially considering that 4 years of it is now, you've been carrying that for 4 years, and kind of it's, I feel like it's almost like a release, you know, like when you see tennis players break down at the end of a match, it's because they've been so on point and focused and ready and fighting, and then at the end of the match, it's just too much for them, and they literally, like, your body just kind of gives up, and because your mind lets go, you know, like the pressure is off now, so you can literally just let your emotion go. And I thought it was really, really moving. In a heartfelt message, and seemingly throwing his entire script for the skit out the window, he says Trump stood up in the White House, the house of all Americans, not Donald Trump's house. I'm paraphrasing, but that's exactly what he said. And raised doubt over the most sacred of civic rights and processes. He continues by berating Republicans for doing nothing about Trump for 4 whole years. A once, even if superficially, proud institution that fell in line like brainwashed children. For 4 whole years, they just towed the line. And that line, in the old Oxford Dictionary, these are my words, is fucking fascism. And I think you can go on and on about the examples of that and the examples of the people who will stay in the party, who will stay in the Republican Party, who will stay in power, kind of presumably towing whichever line the wind is taking. And not least of them is Mitch McConnell, maybe definitely one of the most, if not the most powerful person in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And he says that when asked for comment, Mitch McConnell declined to comment. And then Colbert calls the Latin term in law, which says, your silence gives your consent.
So sorry, there were 2 things that really struck me about that Colbert intro. And the first was that, you know, if anyone who's watched the Colbert Report, he always starts with a monologue. And this was prior to his normal monologue, his prepped monologue. So this was unprepared. And the reason that is this was a reaction to something which happened a matter of minutes before he went on to record that Trump press conference. Well, when I say a matter of minutes, I forget the exact time period, but it was, you know, not planned. So there was some real authenticity there, and I'm normally very cynical of that kind of breakdown on air.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, where there was some real authenticity there, and I think the second thing that really struck me is Colbert has his whole thing is, I mean, he's one of the most prolific satirists, and so good at it. I think he's one of the most effective satirists as well, and I mean, I'd like to talk about this some other time, how that's actually kind of problematic, but the fact that this is something that should be right in his wheelhouse, where this is just a step too far for even the most hardened satirist.
Yeah.
There's certain things that you just can't joke about, and this is not something you can joke about. To undermine the fundamentals of democracy, to cast aspersions over the democratic process just because it's not going your way. I mean, it's just so horrific to even contemplate that someone can be that care that little about institutions, about democracy. And sure, we can argue about, a whole bunch of factors around that democracy, but you cannot argue about the fact that the way the rules were set up, Trump is losing. And to completely undermine that whole process and potentially cause havoc in the process, he doesn't give a damn.
Yeah. And sorry, just to jump in, Rob, like, the process was set up over hundreds of years. It was fought for in blood, dude. Like, to have that process, to go from a fucking monarchy or whatever you want to call it to where we are now, people spent their entire fucking lives creating that, crafting it bit by bit. Obviously, it's not perfect. Obviously, there are issues. But to just so little regard for what happened before you, and now you're losing at the tennis game, and now fucking the balls should be blue.
And I mean, with the irony as well being that the Republicans have done so much to sway things unfairly in their favor as well, and it speaks to that whole persecuted claim to be. The prosecuted claim to be persecuted.
Yeah.
They've had everything in their favor. They've had the option to change things to work unfairly in their advantage, and they still are losing.
And sorry, just to make the point, they have done that.
Yeah.
They have done that. In 4 years, they did that in Bush's term. I mean, they have been doing that. So it's not like they had the chance and didn't do it, like any kind of rational-minded person who was voted in power would have done. They used that opportunity to do it, and still they're losing. It's it was really. I don't think I did it justice in this little skit, but listeners, if you can go and watch it, it really affected me.
It's interesting, and I mean, listeners, I had to take a moment there when Neil was telling us about it. And this morning, so there was a similar, although far less intensely emotional moment in a New York Times podcast where the White House correspondent, the same one who tells the funny story about Jared Kushner phoning Rupert Murdoch, says that everything that is happening, we saw coming. Not even we saw coming on this might be a 10% opportunity. I mean, for weeks now, informed commentators have been saying you will have the red mirage, you will have the Biden surge. It will look very, very different, 3-4 days in, and Trump will not accept it.
Of course.
So that's been expected so widely. And then it happens and people are still so emotionally hit. And I think Neil said it beautifully when he said, you stand in the house of all Americans and you decry the very process that made America.
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's Stephen Colbert's words. Hey?
Very good.
Stephen Colbert's words.
Happy to quote you, quoting him.
Our house, not your house, Donald Trump. Yeah, fucking.
Yeah, and then we spoke off-air, listeners, a moment ago that we're going to do a session on the DA. Everybody calm down.
Get him.
This might be one topic we actually all 100% agree on.
So the thing I would ask us to remember when we do that episode, because it's potent, is the thing you just said, Neil, about people gave their lives for this democracy. And to be so short-sighted that you cannot look back and at least contextualize that. You don't even have to respect it, but at least contextualize it.
And but if you think about Donald Trump as a person, it's not surprising at all.
But I mean, that's what I'm saying. Everyone was it was so obvious.
Yes.
Then just here's fucking positive Polly very gently putting his little flarky, his little wing up just a quarter inch, because I'm respectful of the pain these people are feeling. So I don't want to minimize that for one moment. What I took from some of the stuff I read this morning is that the system is countering him. So he's launched, I can't get the exact amount of court cases right. Frankly, I was too lazy to write them up. I'm going to tell you that I read about between 5 and 8 cases that have already been launched. In the narrative as presented by this New York Times reporter, after that Arizona call by Fox, they started. If you actually plotted on a timeline, most of the court cases landed in the swing states after that. And again, my data is shoddy, but let's say I read between 5 and 8, and between about 3 and 6 of those have already been thrown out by the judge. And there was one case for the Supreme Court, which was about late votes in Pennsylvania. We discussed Pennsylvania is a big deal.
Yes.
The judge didn't say, I find for the Republicans. He said, put these ballots aside. You can count them, but I want to know how many they were. And the New York Times has already done the work and said they don't move the needle. So the Supreme Court said, we want to think about it, give us data, not we find for. And then if I could just lighten us slightly, the Financial Times had a fantastic little story on one of these court cases. I'm shoddy on the exact details of which state and which Republican organ brought the case.
They all look the same anyway.
Thank you. Shit has many colors, but it all stinks. And the excrement I'm referring to here is the Republicans brought this case, and it was about a woman who went to vote, and she couldn't vote because her mail-in ballot had already been received. So you can just see the narrative here, okay? The mail-in ballots are fake, etc.
Yes.
They wrote a whole brief. They brought a court case. The judge threw it out on one very simple basis. He had a half-page kind of finding. The witness involved was not willing to sign an affidavit confirming that the story is true.
God. It's just classic, eh? It's just absolutely on fucking brand.
In takeaway, if Joe Biden wins, and we're not there yet, hopefully by the time the listeners hear this, we are, to my mind, it will be a triumph. It will be a near miss of democracy over not. And the point you guys have made, and that Colbert and the others have made, that this, not only this man, but that whole machine behind him, the donors, the party, all of it, not the voters. I'm excusing the voters. I'm talking about the donors, the party, the machine that brought those voters in. They have undermined the very democracy which they should serve. And if we manage to get Joe Biden elected, it is a narrow victory for something far greater than an old white man who I don't find inspiring.
So just quickly, sorry, Andrew, I know you want to say something, but I think you probably would have seen bigger change if Trump won another 4 years, because then that machine would have won, right? And then you would have really seen the breakdown of democracy, and then maybe all of those people in rural areas would have seen, oh shit, that what these people have bled and died for over 100 years in the US and much longer in other places. That's the reason, It's like a little reminder, when polio springs up in your fucking rural town because you're too stupid to fucking vaccinate your children, then you go, oh, now fucking little Timmy can't walk for the rest of his life. No wonder we vaccinate people. And people kind of need that. People who are so distrusting of a system, and when so much doubt is sown, people need that reminder of, oh, holy hell, things can really go to shit if we don't listen to the things that were kind of like hard fought in our past. And I think if Trump won this election, you would have really seen the kind of consequences of that thinking, of that rhetoric, of all of that stuff. Now, like I feel like the near miss might just give the US enough to carry on in the way it has forever, which, like we've spoken about, people are disenfranchised. You haven't fixed anything. Biden hasn't done shit. And I would argue he's not even the right candidate. But you might just be, as the US has done over decades and decades, just be able to sweep it under the rug again, and like we're carrying on like everything's fine, which I think is a problem.
I think the Republicans have been so bad as well that the Democrats can do practically anything they want, so long as they're not as bad as the Republicans. They're allowed to get away with stuff like fronting Joe Biden as a candidate.
Yeah,
the
100%.
senile old man who can't make his way through a sentence without slurring, refers to the Proud Boys as the poor boys, had some kind of anecdote about getting arrested in Soweto on his way to Robben Island. Consistently calls people lying dog-faced pony soldiers, claiming that it comes from a Clint Eastwood movie, which apparently it does not. He made it up. Like, this is a very low bar. Like, in another election,
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, if he was running against George W. Bush, even, like that'd be serious competition for the man.
Definitely.
And as you say, that electoral system, it needs fixing. I don't know if this is a triumph so much as a foot in the door.
Yeah.
It's a foot in the door, and from there you try and get rid of the electoral college and stuff like that. One person, one vote. Let's keep it simple. Start with the basics. A public holiday. How about that? A public holiday for people to
Andrew,
vote.
Dude,
Andrew, I'm so glad you raised that.
Yeah.
What does it say? Sorry, Neil, if I may. What does it say about your democracy? That on the day, once every 4 years, that you choose arguably the most important thing in your entire country, you can't tell the Oaks, take the day off.
Yeah, you have to take leave. And then, I mean, there's so much stuff like impoverished areas. We're going to put one fucking voting station there as the Republican local kind of council or whatever in the state. We're going to reduce all of those fucking voting stations in the inner city because we know that's where Democratic voters and in general, more impoverished people live. So we're going to put one voting station there. And I mean, it's not just that. One of the Henry Zabrowski from last podcast on the left, when he was going for the Democratic National Convention and going for that vote, after 7 hours standing in the queue, he had to leave to go to fucking work. I mean, it's not just one side either, it's both sides. And that is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. Give a public holiday.
Or just have it on a weekend. If you absolutely can't give a public holiday, have it on a weekend.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are. I think I'm hearing the same thing from all of us. Biden's victory doesn't fix anything in the US. You need to have more polling stations. You need to enable people to vote instead of trying to disable them to vote.
Well, it's interesting because I think to kind of cap this off, I think it's something that happens in a lot of places around the world where the people in power have an interest in undermining democracy for their own interests, for their own ends. And I think we see it everywhere. I mean, we see a bit of it in South Africa as well. And that is something anywhere in the world you need to be aware of and need to fight against.
Definitely.
Shall we do takeaways?
Yeah.
Okay, let me start.
Okay.
You have to face the problems in your society head on, just like you have to face the problems in your own life head on. If you try and squint and look past them and whatever, you'll never solve anything. And the US has been doing that for hundreds of years, and that's a problem. And this gives them another opportunity to do that. And if you do that now again in the US and try and sweep everything under the rug and keep Nancy Pelosi as the head of the fucking DNC and all of that wonderful stuff, you're going to see that 48% of people who voted for Trump re-energized at the next election. You're going to see them fielding a more outlandish candidate. And what is that thing that you say, Joe? Either you face your problems or they become such a huge thing that you can't not face them anymore. And that's like kind of a personal life like axiom, but it goes the same. I mean, you saw less people vote for Trump 4 years ago. Now more people are voting for them. The Democrats take this as a win at their own detriment, I think. This was almost like a barter. This was almost like a just barely scraping in, and if they don't see it for what it is, they're going to get fucked up.
I have a takeaway with that, but Rob, you seem keen to. Okay, so before Neil spoke, just so you know, I'm not anchoring. I thought that maybe the takeaway for me, barring all the interesting stuff we've discussed, is the Democratic Party need to look very hard at those 68, 69, 70 million, 70.2 million people who voted for Donald Trump. And America needs to ask itself what is going on there. And I think Neil made that point very elegantly.
I would say regardless of the result, we need to remember that the system is broken and it still needs fixing. The US is still a plutocracy. Yet, we're just exchanging...
a giant douche versus
the
a
worst of
stirred sandwich, eh?
There we go. There we go. So we need to keep looking for new ways of doing things, new ways of organizing society. Stuff needs to change.
For me, the outcome of this election reflects a lot of what I've thought about during Trump's whole term with his outrageousness. And when I see people supporting him, the idea that, so for anyone who has kids, if they lose at a game, it's something kind of ubiquitous. Everyone says you've got to be a gracious loser. We try and train our kids to do that. You train your kids to, treat each other with respect. Yet when we look at someone like Trump, who obviously does the opposite, when the famous one was his whole grab her by the pussy comment, and everyone was like, locker room talk. And he said, well, if your son said that, if your husband said that, if your brother said that, how would you feel? Oh no, but that's different somehow. And so in this instance, when he's losing and he's legitimately losing. There is nothing untoward going on. And for him to be such a profoundly bad loser, if you were to reduce that on a personal level to someone that you know who would behave like that, you wouldn't accept it. So why accept it in that format? When he does things like cast aspersions on the democratic process, if someone close to you casts aspersions on things in that way, it doesn't have to be with regards to politics, you wouldn't accept that. Why do we accept craziness from politicians?
In fact, the bar we set for our leaders should be higher than the bar we set for ourselves.
And the whole fascination with the Trump presidency is that the bar is lower. I think even for the voters, they see the bar. It's almost like watching reality TV and feeling better about yourself. That's kind of the viewpoint. Gentlemen, thank you. On that note, Mr. Rob Cass.
Cheers.
Mr. Andrew Park.
Peas out.
Peas out? As opposed to peace, eh?
Yeah. Vegan.
Peas are much more Republican than peace.
Peace is not a vegan concept.
Mr. Janus Landman. And our technician, Mr. Francois de Villiers. Thank you. Good night.